The envelope arrived on a Tuesday. Clean, professional. No return address. Inside there was a letter, typed, formatted like a contract. And at the bottom, a signature I'd recognize anywhere. My son's signature. The same handwriting I'd watched form over thousands of homework sheets, scholarship applications, and birthday cards. But this wasn't a card. It was a cease-and-desist letter. From my own son. To me. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Some cruel joke. But then I saw the date. It had been sent exactly 1 week after he received his first paycheck as a lawyer. The career I'd sacrificed everything to give him. And he'd used that money, that first payment for all the years I'd poured into him, to legally erase me from his life. Beat. Silence. Her voice cracks slightly, but remains controlled. I didn't scream. I didn't collapse. I just stood there, holding the paper, realizing that my son hadn't just walked away. He'd built a case against me. If you've ever given everything to someone you love, only to watch them use it against you, this story is for you. Stay with me, because what I discovered next changed everything I thought I knew about my own family. And if you felt this kind of betrayal, tell me where you're watching from in the comments. You're not alone.
I was 24 when I became a mother. 24 years old, working 2 part-time jobs, living in a studio apartment that was too small for one person, let alone 2. And I was 25 when I became a single one. His father left before the ultrasound photos were even developed. I remember that day clearly. We were sitting in my car outside the clinic and I showed him the fuzzy black and white image, that tiny blur that was supposed to be our future. He stared at it for maybe 10 seconds. Then he said, "I'm not ready for this. Not we'll figure it out. Not I'm scared but I'm here. Just, I'm not ready." He handed the photo back to me like it was a receipt he didn't need and that was it. He said it wasn't part of his plan, that he had things he wanted to do first, places he wanted to see. I never saw him again. No child support. No birthday cards. No late-night calls asking how his son was doing. He just disappeared. And I became the plan. The only plan. Pause. Her voice steadies. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3 when I could find the hours. I waitressed during the day at a diner on 5th Street, the kind of place where the coffee was always burnt and the regulars knew your name. Then I cleaned offices at night, vacuuming conference rooms and scrubbing toilets in buildings where people made more in an hour than I made in a week. I slept 4 hours a night if I was lucky. Sometimes 3. I wore the same winter coat for 7 years because new boots for him mattered more than staying warm. I remember one winter when the lining tore and I just kept wearing it anyway, stuffing newspaper in the pockets to block the wind. I didn't go to my high school reunion. I didn't take vacations. I didn't date. People would ask me, "Don't you want a life of your own?" And I'd think, this is my life. He's my life. I became smaller so he could grow. And I told myself it was worth it. Every single sacrifice, every missed opportunity, every moment I swallowed my own needs, I told myself it was worth it. Because when I looked at him, this brilliant, focused, determined boy with eyes that saw the world differently than I ever could, I saw a future I never had. A future I never even imagined for myself. He was going to be someone. Someone important. Someone respected. And I was going to make sure of it no matter what it cost me. Pause. Her voice softens but remains steady. I didn't realize back then that making sure would mean erasing myself completely. Piece by piece. Year by year. I stopped having opinions that contradicted his. I stopped making plans that didn't revolve around his schedule. I stopped existing as anything other than his mother. But that's what I did. I disappeared into his success. I became a shadow of a woman I used to be, or maybe a woman I never got the chance to become. And for years, so many years, I thought that was love. I thought that's what good mothers did. They sacrificed. They disappeared. They made themselves small. I thought I was doing the right thing. I never imagined that one day he'd make me disappear completely. By the time he was in middle school, people already saw it. His teachers would pull me aside at parent-teacher conferences with this look on their faces. Part amazement, part pride, like they'd discovered something rare. They called him exceptional. Gifted. One of the brightest students we've ever had. His fifth grade teacher, Mrs. Kowalski, told me, "Your son is going to change the world one day. I can feel it." And I believed her. God, I believed her so completely. Coaches called him focused, disciplined, mature beyond his years. He joined the debate team in 7th grade, and by 8th grade he was captain. He'd stay after school for hours, practicing arguments, researching cases, memorizing rebuttals. I'd pick him up at 7 p.m. and he'd be the last one there, still in the classroom, still working. I'd watch him through the window sometimes before I went in. The way he stood when he spoke. The way he gestured. The confidence. He looked like someone who belonged somewhere bigger than the life I could give him. And that made me so proud it hurt. I just called him mine. Mine to protect. Mine to support. Mine to build a future for. Beat. He got into the best high school in the city on a merit scholarship. I remember the day the letter came. We were sitting at the kitchen table and he opened it so calmly, like he already knew. He read it once, then looked up at me and said, "I got in." Not excited. Not surprised. Just certain. Like the world was finally catching up to what he already knew about himself. I cried. He didn't. He just smiled, this small, satisfied smile, and said, "I told you I would." And he had. He'd been telling me since he was 8 years old that he was going to be a lawyer. That he was going to argue cases, defend people, win. He had a plan even then. A plan I helped him build step by step, year by year. High school was the same. Top of his class. Debate champion. Mock trial MVP. Then he got into the best university in the state. Full academic scholarship. Then law school. And full ride. Every step forward felt like proof that I'd done something right. That all the nights I went without dinner so he could have lunch money meant something. That all the times I said no to myself so I could say yes to him were justified. Every acceptance letter, every award, every achievement. It was validation. Not just of him. Of me. Of the choice I'd made to give him everything. Long pause. Her voice grows quieter. At his law school graduation I sat in the back row. The very last row, tucked into the corner where the light didn't quite reach. I was the only family member there. No father. No grandparents. No aunts or uncles. Just me. I watched him walk across that stage in his cap and gown, watched him shake hands with the dean, watched him accept his diploma with that same calm confidence he'd always had. And I cried. Not just because I was proud, though I was desperately, overwhelmingly proud, but because I was exhausted. Exhausted in a way that sleep couldn't fix. Exhausted from years of holding my breath, waiting for him to need me, waiting for him to see me. And somewhere deep inside, in a place I didn't want to look, I wondered, does he even see me anymore? Or have I become invisible? A function, not a person. A means to an end. The woman who paid for this, but not the woman worth knowing. Her voice tightens. I told myself I was being dramatic. That every mother feels this way when their child grows up and moves on. That it was natural. Healthy even. That I should be happy he didn't need me anymore. But that wasn't it. It wasn't that he didn't need me. It was that he didn't see me. And deep down I knew it. I just wasn't ready to admit it yet. After he graduated, he moved to the city. Got a job at one of those law firms with glass walls and a name that takes 3 breaths to say. The kind of place where the interns wear suits that cost more than my monthly rent. He was so excited when he got the offer. Called me right away, one of the last times he called me first. "Mom," he said, "I got it. They offered me the position." I could hear the smile in his voice, the pride. And I was proud too. Of course I was. But there was something else in his voice. Relief. Like he'd finally arrived at the place he was always supposed to be. And I wasn't part of that place. He moved 2 weeks later. Rented an apartment in the city in a neighborhood I'd never been to. A neighborhood I couldn't afford to visit casually. He sent me a picture of the view from his window. The skyline, all those lights, the city stretched out like a promise. He said, "I made it, Mom." And I texted back, "I'm so proud of you." But what I wanted to say was, when do I get to see you? When do I get to see where you sleep, where you eat breakfast, what your life looks like now? When do I stop being the person you report to and start being the person you share with? But I didn't say any of that. Because I didn't want to be needy. I didn't want to be the mother who couldn't let go. Pause. Her breathing is audible. So I gave him space. And at first it was fine. He'd call once a week. We'd talk for 10, maybe 15 minutes. He'd tell me about work, about cases he was observing, about the lawyers he was learning from. I'd tell him about my day, though there wasn't much to tell. Work, home, sleep, repeat. But I'd try to make it interesting, try to make him laugh, try to make him want to keep talking. And for a while he did. But then the calls started coming less often. Once a week became once every 2 weeks. Then once a month. Then, silence. I'd text him, "How are you?" He'd reply 3 days later, "Good. Busy." I'd text, "Miss you. Can we talk soon?" He'd reply, "Yeah. Soon." But soon never came. I'd ask, "Can I see you this weekend?" He'd say, "Can't. Work thing." "How about next weekend?" "Busy." "Maybe the one after." But the one after never happened either. And every time I told myself it was temporary. That he was just adjusting to his new life. That once things settled down he'd come back. Not physically, I didn't expect him to move home. But emotionally. I thought he'd come back to me emotionally. That we'd find a new rhythm, a new way of being mother and son now that he was grown. But we never did. Instead, I watched him drift further and further away, like a boat slipping past the horizon. And I stood on the shore, waving, calling out, pretending I couldn't see that he'd already disappeared. Her voice hardened slightly. I started keeping a calendar. I'd mark the days he called, the days he texted, the days we actually spoke for more than 5 minutes. I'd cross off the days we were supposed to see each other but didn't. There were a lot of crossed-off days. By the end of the first year, the calendar looked like a graveyard of plans that never happened. And I started to realize something. He wasn't pulling away because he was busy. He was pulling away because he wanted to. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't adjustment. This was a choice. He was choosing not to call. Choosing not to visit. Choosing not to see me. And I didn't know why. I replayed every conversation we'd ever had, looking for the moment I'd done something wrong. Had I been too controlling? Too needy? Too present? Had I loved him too much? Is there such a thing as loving someone too much? I didn't have answers. All I had was the growing, sickening realization that my son, the person I'd built my entire life around, didn't want me in his. Long pause. And the worst part? I blamed myself. I told myself I must have done something. I must have failed him somehow. Why else would he leave? Why else would the boy I raised, the boy I gave everything to, choose to erase me from his life? There had to be a reason. And if there was a reason, it had to be me. So I made myself smaller. I stopped asking to see him. I stopped calling. I sent short, cheerful texts, thinking of you, with a heart emoji, and pretended it didn't destroy me when he didn't respond. I told myself that's what good mothers do. They let go. They give their children space. They don't cling. But letting go shouldn't feel like being erased. And space shouldn't feel like exile. I didn't know that yet. But I was about to learn. The letter arrived on a Tuesday in March. I remember because it was raining, that heavy, cold rain that makes everything gray. I'd just gotten home from work, soaked through because my umbrella had broken and I hadn't bought a new one yet. I was peeling off my wet coat when I saw it. A white envelope on the floor by the door. It must have been slipped through the mail slot. No stamp. No return address. Just my name typed on a label. Formal. Impersonal. I thought maybe it was a bill or some kind of official notice. I almost didn't open it right away. But something about it felt wrong. The weight of it. The quality of the paper. So I opened it. And I wish I hadn't. Her voice becomes very quiet. The letter didn't start with Mom. It didn't start with dear, or to, or any word that suggested I was a person to him. It started with ms. Last name ms. Like I was a stranger. Like I was someone he'd never met. Like I hadn't been the one who stayed up all night when he had pneumonia at age 6, holding him while he coughed, feeling his fever burn through his small body. Like I hadn't been the one who drove him to debate tournaments at 5 a.m., sat through 8-hour competitions just to watch him speak for 10 minutes. Like I hadn't been the one who co-signed his student loans, who worked overtime to help with expenses his scholarship didn't cover, who sent him care packages during finals week with his favorite snacks and notes that said, "You've got this." Ms. Last name. That's how it started. Beat. Her breathing is audible. The language was legal. Detached. Surgical. It used words like hereby, forthwith, pursuant to. It cited statutes I didn't understand. It referenced personal boundaries and mental health and emotional well-being. And then it got to the point. I was requested, no demanded, to cease all attempts at contact. No phone calls. No text messages. No emails. No letters. No visits to his residence or place of employment. No contact of any kind, direct or indirect. It said that my persistent attempts at communication were unwelcome and distressing. That my failure to respect boundaries had caused him significant emotional harm. That any violation of this request would result in further legal action, including but not limited to a restraining order. I read that part 3 times. Restraining order. Against me. His mother. The woman who raised him alone, who sacrificed everything, who loved him more than I've ever loved anything in my life. And at the bottom his signature. Neat. Confident. Oily. The same signature I'd seen on his law school applications, on his apartment lease, on his bar exam registration. The signature of the man I'd helped create. Used to destroy me. Long pause. She's clearly trying not to cry. I stood there in my wet coat holding that letter and I felt something break inside me. Not my heart. It had been breaking for months, slowly, in pieces too small to name. This was something else. This was the shattering of every story I'd told myself about who we were. The story that said I sacrificed and it mattered. The story that said he'll understand one day. The story that said love is enough. All those stories, gone. Replaced by legal language and a stranger's signature. Her voice becomes stronger but still quiet. I read the letter again. And again. I was looking for something, some clue, some explanation. Some sentence that would make this make sense. But there was nothing. Just cold, clinical language designed to keep me away. To erase me. And the worst part, the part that made me physically sick, was that he'd done this deliberately. This wasn't a heat-of-the-moment decision. This was planned. Researched. Written by someone who knew exactly what he was doing. He'd used his legal training, the training I'd helped pay for, to craft a document that would hurt me in the most precise, most devastating way possible. He hadn't just walked away. He'd built a wall. A legal, official, unbreakable wall. And he'd done it in writing so there could be no misunderstanding, no room for interpretation, no way for me to pretend it meant something other than what it was. Rejection. Complete, total, legal rejection. From my own son. She sets the letter down. Long silence. I didn't cry right away. I just sat there on the floor in my wet coat holding that letter thinking, this is what I raised. This is what my love became. 28 years of sacrifice, of putting him first, of building his future. And this is what it bought me. A cease-and-desist letter. A legal demand to stay out of his life. As if I were a threat. As if I were dangerous. As if loving him too much was a crime worth prosecuting. And for the first time in my life I wondered, did I do this? Did I love him so hard, give him so much that he had no choice but to run? Did I make him hate me by making myself too necessary? I didn't have answers. All I had was a letter telling me I was no longer wanted. And a signature that looked like my son's. But written by a stranger. I didn't tell anyone at first. For 3 days I kept the letter hidden in my kitchen drawer, under the takeout menus and old grocery receipts. I'd take it out sometimes late at night and read it again thinking maybe I'd misunderstood. But the words never changed. And the shame never left. What kind of mother gets legally banned from her own son's life? What did I do wrong? What kind of person was I that my own child needed a lawyer to keep me away? These questions circled in my head like vultures. I couldn't eat. Couldn't sleep. I called in sick to work for 2 days, something I never did. And on the 3rd day I broke. I called Linda. Her voice softens. Linda and I have been friends since we were 19. She was there when I found out I was pregnant. There when his father left. There through every struggle, every milestone, every moment I thought I couldn't keep going. She'd seen me at my worst and never judged. So I called her. And I told her everything. We met at the coffee shop on Maple Street. The one with the chipped mugs and the owner who never remembers your order but always smiles anyway. I brought the letter. I didn't want to. It felt like carrying proof of my failure. But I needed someone else to see it, to tell me if I was crazy or if this was real. Linda read it twice. Her face didn't change, but her hands tightened on the paper. When she looked up, her eyes were angry, not at me but for me. Who wrote this? She asked. He did, I said. It's his signature. She shook her head slowly. No. I mean, yes, he signed it. But who wrote this? Who put these ideas in his head? I didn't understand. What do you mean? Linda leaned forward, her voice low but intense. This isn't him. This isn't the boy who used to call you every Sunday during college just to tell you about his week. This isn't the kid who cried at your birthday last year because you wouldn't let him buy you a gift. I blinked. I'd forgotten that. He had cried. Just a little. Said I deserved more than I let myself have. People don't just wake up one day and decide to legally cut off their mother, Linda continued. Not without help. Not without someone whispering in their ear. I stared at her. You think someone's influencing him? I think, she said carefully, that someone convinced him you were the problem. The idea hit me like cold water. Who? Linda set the letter down. Has he mentioned anyone new in his life? A partner? A therapist? A mentor? Anyone he's been spending time with? And that's when I remembered. Beat. About 6 months ago he'd mentioned someone in passing. A woman. Her name was Victoria. He said she was helping him set boundaries. At the time I thought it sounded healthy. I was glad he was working on himself, learning to be an adult. I didn't think about what those boundaries might mean. I didn't think I was the boundary he needed to set. Victoria, I said quietly. Linda's expression sharpened. Who is she? I don't know. He never told me much. Just that she was someone he respected. Someone who understood him. Linda pulled out her phone. Do you know her last name? Yo. Does he have social media? Yes, but he blocked me months ago. Linda's jaw tightened. Give me his name. I'll find her. Pause. The sound of typing. Searching. It took Linda less than 5 minutes. She used her daughter's Instagram account. Her daughter was still connected to him. And there she was. Victoria. In photo after photo standing next to my son. At firm events. At dinners. At galas. Always touching his arm, leaning into him, smiling like she owned him. Maybe she did. Because the son I knew, the one who used to call me just to hear my voice, was gone. And in his place was this stranger, standing next to a woman who looked at the camera like she'd won something. Linda turned the phone toward me. Is this her? I nodded, unable to speak. She was older than him. Maybe late 30s. Polished. Elegant. The kind of woman who looked like she'd never struggled a day in her life. The kind of woman I could never be. Linda scrolled through the photos. And then she stopped. Look at this. It was a post from Victoria's account. A photo of her and my son at some formal event. Caption read. So proud of this man for choosing himself. It takes courage to cut toxic ties, even family ones. Black heart. The words blurred. Toxic ties. Family ones. Me. He was talking about me. And my son had let her. No worse than that. He'd agreed with her. Her voice cracks. Linda reached across the table and took my hand. This isn't your fault, she said firmly. But it felt like it was. Because if I wasn't the problem, why was I the one being erased? I'm not proud of what I did next. But I needed to understand. I needed to know who this woman was and what she'd done to my son. Linda helped me. Over the next week we pieced together a picture of Victoria that made my blood run cold. She wasn't just some girlfriend. She was a strategist. We found her LinkedIn profile. She worked at the same firm as my son, not as a lawyer but as a corporate wellness consultant. Her bio said she specialized in boundary setting, personal optimization and toxic relationship recovery. Toxic relationship recovery. The phrase made my stomach turn. We found her blog. She wrote about liberating high achievers from family obligations that no longer serve them. She had entire posts about parental enmeshment and the hidden cost of guilt-based love. In one post she wrote, "Many successful people are held back by family members who refuse to see them as adults. These relationships are often disguised as love, but they're actually control. The first step to freedom is recognizing the difference." I read that post 5 times. And every time I wondered, is that how he sees me? As someone controlling him? As someone holding him back? As toxic? Long pause. But it got worse. Linda found a podcast Victoria had been on 3 months ago. The episode was called, How to Break Free from Family Dysfunction. I made myself listen to it. In the interview, Victoria never mentioned my son by name, but she told a story that was unmistakably about us. She talked about a young lawyer who came to her feeling suffocated by parental expectations. She said his mother had sacrificed everything for him, but used that sacrifice as emotional leverage. She said he felt guilty for living his own life, because his mother had given up hers. And then she said the part that broke me. Some parents love their children, but they don't know how to let them go. And that kind of love, however well-intentioned, becomes a cage. My job is to help people find the key. The interviewer asked, and did he find it? Victoria laughed. A light, pleased sound. He did. He set the boundary. It was hard, but he's thriving now. Free. Her voice shakes with anger. Free. He said he was free. As if I were a prison. As if loving him, raising him, sacrificing for him made me his jailer. And my son had let her tell this story. He'd let her reduce our entire relationship to a cage he needed to escape. He'd let her broadcast his liberation to strangers on the internet. He'd let her make me the villain. And he'd never once asked for my side of the story. Beat. Linda and I kept digging. We found photos going back 8 months. Dinner dates. Weekend trips. Conferences. They weren't just colleagues. They were together. And based on the timeline, she'd entered his life right around the time he started pulling away from me. Coincidence? I didn't think so. Linda didn't either. She targeted him, Linda said quietly one night as we sat in her kitchen going through screenshots. What do you mean? I mean, she saw a successful, vulnerable young man who was close to his mother, maybe too close in her eyes, and she decided to fix him. To make him hers. I wanted to argue. I wanted to say my son was smarter than that, stronger than that. But I couldn't. Because the evidence was right there. Every post. Every caption. Every carefully chosen word. She'd rewritten our story. Made my love look like manipulation. Made his dependence look like dysfunction. Made my existence look like the thing holding him back from happiness. And he'd believed her. Or maybe he'd wanted to believe her. Maybe it was easier to blame me than to feel guilty for outgrowing the woman who raised him. Maybe Victoria gave him permission to do what he already wanted to do. Leave. And never look back. I wanted to confront him. God, I wanted it so badly. I wanted to show up at his office, walk past the receptionist, find him in his glass-walled office and demand answers. I wanted to ask him, when did I become the enemy? When did sacrifice become manipulation? When did love become control? I wanted to show him the podcast, the blog posts, the photos. I wanted to ask if he knew what she was saying about us. If he knew she was using our pain to build her brand. If he cared at all that she turned me into a cautionary tale. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. I wanted to make him see me, really see me, maybe for the first time in years. But I couldn't. Because the letter made it clear. Any contact would be considered harassment. Any attempt to reach him would be a violation. Any effort to explain myself would be used against me. So instead I did what I'd always done. I swallowed it. I made myself small. And I wrote a letter I knew I'd never send. Her voice becomes very quiet, almost like she's reading. I started writing it late one night when I couldn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with a pen and a notebook. The same notebook I'd used to track his homework assignments when he was in elementary school. And I wrote. I wrote about the night he was born. How the nurse placed him in my arms and I looked down at his tiny, perfect face and thought, I will never let anything hurt you. I wrote about the first time he called me Mama. About the way he used to hold my hand when we crossed the street even when he got too old for it. About the science fair project we stayed up all night working on when he was in 6th grade, building a model volcano that exploded all over the kitchen. I wrote about his first day of high school. How nervous he was even though he wouldn't admit it. How I drove him there even though he said he could take the bus. How I watched him walk through those doors and felt this sharp, bittersweet pride. He's growing up, he's leaving me, he's becoming himself. I wrote about the nights I worked double shifts to pay for his debate team fees. About the time I sold my grandmother's ring, the only valuable thing I owned, to help cover his first semester of college when the scholarship didn't come through in time. About the day he called me crying from law school because he'd failed a practice exam and thought he wasn't good enough. How I stayed on the phone with him for 2 hours talking him down, reminding him of every hard thing he'd already overcome. I wrote about every sacrifice. Every missed opportunity. Every time I said no to myself so I could say yes to him. And at the end I wrote, I don't need you to love me the way I loved you. I don't need you to sacrifice for me the way I sacrificed for you. I don't even need you to understand why I did what I did. But I need you to see me. Just once. Not as a problem to solve. Not as a boundary to set. Not as a toxic tie to cut. But as a person. A woman who gave everything she had because she thought you were worth it. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I gave too much. Maybe I loved too hard. Maybe I made you feel like you owed me something you could never repay. But I never wanted repayment. I just wanted you. And now I don't even have that. Long pause. She folds the letter slowly. I read it over 3 times. Changed a few words. Folded it carefully. Put it in an envelope. And then I set it on my kitchen counter and stared at it. For 3 days it sat there. And every day I thought about sending it. I even addressed it once. Wrote his name in my careful handwriting. But I didn't send it. Because I realized something. He didn't want to hear from me. He didn't want my explanation. He didn't want my side of the story. He'd already decided who I was. And Victoria had given him the language to make that decision feel righteous. Sending the letter wouldn't change his mind. It would just prove to him that I couldn't respect boundaries. That I was exactly what she said I was. A mother who couldn't let go. So I didn't send it. I put it in a drawer. And I let him go. 3 weeks after the letter arrived, I started seeing a therapist. Not because I thought I was crazy. Not because I thought I'd done something wrong. But because I needed someone, anyone, to tell me I wasn't imagining this. That the pain I felt was real. That I had a right to feel destroyed. Her name was Dr. Ellis. She was older than me, maybe 60, with gray hair she wore in a neat bun and glasses that made her look like someone's kind grandmother. She didn't look like someone who would say hard things. But she did. In our 3rd session, after I'd spent 2 hours explaining everything, the letter, Victoria, the silence, the photos, the podcast, she asked me a question I wasn't ready for. Do you think he's angry at you? I froze. The question felt like a punch. For what? I asked. Dr. Ellis looked at me gently, the way you look at someone before you tell them bad news. For being everything. For sacrificing so much that he feels like he owes you his entire life. The room went very quiet. I could hear the clock on her wall ticking. The sound of traffic outside. My own breathing. I never asked him to owe me anything, I said finally. I know, she said. But did he know that? I didn't answer. Because I didn't know. Had I ever told him he didn't owe me? Or had I just assumed he understood? Long pause. Dr. Ellis leaned back in her chair. Let me ask you this, she said. When he succeeded, when he got into a good school, won an award, achieved something, how did you feel? Proud, I said immediately. Just proud. I hesitated. What do you mean? Did you feel like his success validated your sacrifices? Like it proved that all the hard years were worth it? The question cut deep. Because yes, I had felt that. Every time he succeeded, it felt like proof that I'd done the right thing. That giving up my life for his had meaning. Yes, I whispered. Dr. Ellis nodded. And when he struggled, when he failed, I thought about the law school phone call. The night he thought he wasn't good enough. I felt like I needed to fix it, I admitted. Like if he failed, I'd failed. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that broke me. You didn't just raise him. You built your entire identity around him. And that's a heavy thing for a child to carry. Her voice shakes. I wanted to argue. I wanted to say that's what mothers do. They give everything for their children. But Dr. Ellis wasn't done. When you make your child the center of your universe, you don't just love them. You need them. And children can feel that need. Can feel like pressure. Like obligation. Like they're not allowed to fail because you've sacrificed too much. I felt tears on my face. So you're saying this is my fault? No, she said firmly. I'm saying it's complicated. You loved him deeply. But love and need can get tangled together. And sometimes when children grow up, they have to untangle that. Sometimes forcefully. I looked down at my hands. So I loved him too much. You loved him the only way you knew how, Dr. Ellis corrected. But he might have experienced that love as something he had to escape in order to become his own person. I wanted to scream. I wanted to say, but I was everything he had. I was the only one who stayed. I was the only one who believed in him when no one else did. But I didn't scream. I just cried. Because maybe she was right. Maybe I'd loved him so hard he felt suffocated. Maybe I'd given so much he felt guilty. Maybe I'd made myself so essential that he had to cut me off completely just to breathe. But even if that was true, even if I'd made mistakes, even if I'd loved him in a way that hurt him, did that justify this? Did that justify a legal letter? Did that justify letting someone else rewrite our entire history? Did that justify erasing me? Beat. Her voice hardens. And the answer was no. No, it doesn't. Because even if I made mistakes, I deserved a conversation. I deserved to be seen as a person, not a problem. I deserved the chance to hear his side before being deleted from his life. But he didn't give me that chance. He just left. And he let someone else tell him why. 2 months after the cease-and-desist letter arrived, I wrote him one last time. Not the emotional letter I'd written before. The one full of memories and pain and pleading. This one was different. This one was for me. I didn't write it to change his mind. I didn't write it to make him see me. I wrote it because I needed to say goodbye. Not to him. To the story I'd been telling myself for 28 years. The story that said, if I give enough, I'll be enough. The story that said, sacrifice equals love. The story that said, he'll understand one day. I needed to let that story go. And this letter was how I did it. She picks up the letter. Her voice is steady now. I kept it short. No long paragraphs. No detailed memories. No emotional pleading. Just the truth. Simple. Clear. Final. It said, I received your letter. And I want you to know, I respect your decision. You have the right to choose your life and I won't fight you on that. But I also have the right to name what this is. This isn't boundaries. This is erasure. You didn't just ask for space. You used the education I helped you get to legally remove the woman who helped you get it. You didn't just walk away. You built a case. Against me. And you let someone else tell you I was the problem. I don't know if you'll ever understand what that feels like. To give everything you have to someone only to watch them use it to destroy you. But I want you to know something. I don't regret raising you. I don't regret the sacrifices I made. I don't even regret loving you the way I did. But I do regret one thing. I regret teaching you that love is something you owe instead of something you choose. I regret making you feel like my sacrifices were a debt you had to repay. I regret not showing you that I was a person, not just a function. And I regret that you learned to see me through someone else's eyes instead of your own. I hope one day you understand the difference between a boundary and a wall. Between protecting yourself and erasing someone. Between growing up and cutting off. But I won't be here waiting for that day. Because for the first time in 28 years I'm choosing myself. I'm choosing to stop waiting for you to see me. I'm choosing to stop shrinking. I'm choosing to stop making myself small so you can feel big. This is my boundary. I release you from whatever debt you think you owe me. You don't owe me love. You don't owe me time. You don't owe me anything. But I also release myself from the belief that I failed you. I did the best I could with what I had. And that has to be enough. Goodbye. She seals the envelope. Holds it for a moment. I didn't sign it, love, Mom. I signed it with my name. My full name. Because I wasn't writing as his mother anymore. I was writing as a woman who had finally remembered she was more than that. She places the letter in a mailbox. The sound of it dropping inside is final. I don't know if he read it. I don't know if he cared. I don't know if it changed anything for him. But it changed everything for me. Because for the first time in my life I stopped waiting for permission to matter. I just mattered. To myself. And that was enough. I moved 6 months later. Nothing dramatic. No grand gesture of starting over. Just a smaller apartment in a different neighborhood. Closer to Linda. Closer to the community college where I'd started taking art classes. Closer to myself. The new place had big windows that let in morning light. It had a small kitchen where I could cook just for me. It had a second room I turned into a studio. I started painting again. Something I hadn't done since before he was born. I'd forgotten how much I loved it. The smell of the paint. The feel of the brush. The way color could say things words couldn't. I painted for hours. Not for anyone else. Just for me. I also started saying no. No to extra shifts I didn't want to work. No to people who asked me to do things I didn't have energy for. No to guilt that told me I should be doing more, giving more, being more. I started existing as more than just his mother. I became a woman with hobbies, a woman with friends, a woman who took herself to dinner sometimes and didn't feel pathetic eating alone. A woman who could sit in silence without it feeling like abandonment. And slowly, so slowly I almost didn't notice, something shifted. The weight I'd been carrying for 28 years started to lift. Not all at once, but piece by piece. Like shedding skin I'd outgrown but forgotten I was wearing. Her voice softens. I stopped checking his social media. I stopped wondering if he thought of me. I stopped waiting for an apology I'd never get. And one morning about 8 months after I'd moved, I woke up and realized I didn't need him to see me anymore. Because I finally saw myself. Not as someone who'd failed. Not as someone who'd loved wrong. Not as someone who'd been erased. But as someone who'd survived. Who'd given everything she had. And who'd learned to give that same love to herself. The scar is still there. I won't lie and say it doesn't hurt. There are still moments when I see a young man who looks like him and my chest tightens. Still moments when I remember something he said as a child and I have to sit down. Still moments when I wonder, what if I'd done things differently? But those moments are smaller now. Quieter. And they don't control me anymore. Because the scar is mine now. Not his. Mine. And I'm learning to carry it with something that feels almost like pride. Not pride in what happened, but pride in what I became after. A woman who chose herself. Finally. If this story touched something in you, I need you to know, you're not alone. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And if you've ever loved someone so much you lost yourself, share your story below. Because these truths, they need to be spoken. Your pain deserves to be witnessed. Your story deserves to be heard. And I'll be here for the next one. Subscribe. Stay close. There are more stories to uncover, and we're uncovering them together.